Hello Muggle World! And today we're going to be doing a video that's probably going to piss almost the entire internet off, but I'm doing it anyway. Today we're going to be talking about the character that is Sirius Black. So for this video, I'm going to be talking everything strictly from the books, nothing from like tweets or what used to be Pottermore, now the Wizarding World. None of that I'm taking into account. So all this is straight from books. I will be reading some passages from the books, and we're just going to be talking about Sirius Black. And let me just say right now, before you start throwing the dislike and the hate comments out, which is going to happen because I'm not going to be talking about how great Sirius Black is, because he wasn't. And I have passages from books and things to back me up with this. Now, I'm not saying he was like a Death Eater or he was just an like completely horrible person and is not worth like anybody's time or sympathy or anything. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying he didn't do good things either. I'm not saying that. I just think he is overrated and people seem to just blow over how he actually is and they make him better than he actually is. I don't think he's as good as people make him out to be. And so that's what today's video is going to be. I'm going to try and keep it as in order as possible from childhood to death. So I have no promises on this because there is a lot of stuff on Sirius Black, especially in Order of the Phoenix, where we get a lot of his childhood backstory, and there's things in Deathly Hallows from his backstory. So if I do miss out on some things and come back later, there's a lot of crap. I have taken the liberty of going through the Harry Potter books and marking all the Sirius Black. Now, every time his name was mentioned, I didn't mark that down because sometimes it was a throwaway line, like Sirius and Lupin were standing in the room at Grimmauld Place, and that's basically it. They didn't do anything. They were just standing there. But a lot of the lines he has talked about, a lot of his childhood, a lot of important moments, his letters to Harry, those have all been marked, and we're going to go through them all. So this is going to be a long video, just so you know. Now, for those who are going to throw out the dislike comments and the dislike button, that's fine. You have your opinion of him. That's great. All I'm asking is that you at least hear me out. I'm not trying to make him out to be a bad person. I'm really not. I'm just making him out to how he is. Let's start with his childhood, shall we? Okay. So, we all know Sirius didn't grow up in a very, very good house. He didn't even grow up in a good household. I can't even say very, very good. He grew up horribly. His mother and his father, from what we know of, were very supportive in the dark arts. They never became Death Eaters, but they agreed with what Voldemort wanted out of the world. They thought Muggles should die and be below them, and they thought mudbloods or Muggleborns should be offed as well, and that's just not a good household to grow up in. So Sirius grew up in a terrible household, and we all know that he didn't want to be like his family and he tried to stand out from them. And speaking of terrible household, let's talk about his mother, shall we? Walburga Black. And we're going to start off in Order of the Phoenix. This is chapter 4, number 12, Grimmauld Place. And this is where Tonks trips and opens up the curtains for the portrait to start screaming. And this is what he grew up with. It says, Lupin and Mrs. Weasley darted forward to try and tug the curtains shut over the old woman, but they could not close, and she screeched louder than ever, brandishing clawing hands as though trying to tear at their faces. Filth! Scum! Byproducts of dirt and vileness! Half-breeds! Mutants! Freaks! Begone from this place! How dare you befoul the house of my fathers! And then Sirius comes in. "You!" she howled, her eyes popping at the sight of the man. "Blood traitor, abomination, shame of my flesh." Charming woman, isn't she? That's a lot more than probably he heard. I'm pretty sure he heard a lot of it. I'm not saying he didn't. But, you know, he did grow up to become even more of a disgrace. And then to get more of his childhood, we go to chapter 6, the noble, most ancient house of Black. And Sirius is talking to Creature about cleaning the house and how it's looking. He says it's getting blacker every day. It's filthy. And then Creature goes on to say, "Master always liked his little joke. Master was a nasty, ungrateful swine who broke his mother's heart." "My mother didn't have a heart, Creature," Sirius snapped. "She kept herself alive out of pure spite." So obviously he didn't have a very good home. He grew up in a terrible household, and that's bound to serve problems much later in life, especially from a kid that stayed there from the day he was born to 16 years old. He ran away when he was 16, but still, to stay in that house is going to cause problems later in life, especially if you don't get help for it, which we all know, some reason Wizarding World doesn't have therapy. It should, but it doesn't. At least we never see it if it does. We kind of don't really know too much more about his childhood besides how awful it was and just really sucked. We do get some more insights to a few of the moments and such, and this goes to when Sirius is on the train with James, and he talks a bit about his home life as well. Lily and Severus are in a compartment with James and Sirius, and they're talking about what house they're gonna be in, and so Lily and Snape are talking, and they're like, "This is it, we're off to Hogwarts." And then Snape brings up, "You better be in Slytherin." And Slytherin, one of the other boys, had shown no interest until that point. So they could care less that they were in there, mind you. This is important information. They could care less till he mentioned Slytherin. And then James says, "Who wants to be in Slytherin? I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" And Sirius wasn't smiling at the time because his whole family's in Slytherin and all this. And he goes on to say, "My whole family have been in Slytherin." And then James says, "Blimey, and I thought you seemed all right." Sirius grinned. "Maybe I'll break the tradition. Where are you headed if you have the choice?" James lifted an invisible sword. "Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart, like my dad." Before they left the compartment in their first year, before they even got to Hogwarts, Snape's going on about how he didn't want to be in Gryffindor, and James is like, "Why?" And he's like, then they're having this back and forth, and Snape says, "No, you'd rather be brawny than brainy." And Sirius says, "Where are you hoping to go, seeing as you're neither?" And then they laugh, and Lily's like, "Come on, Severus, let's find another compartment." And James and Sirius imitate her lofty voice. James tries to trip Snape as he passes and says, "See ya, Snivellus." And we don't know who said it, but honestly, I could see them both saying it at the same time. It says, "See ya, Snivellus," a voice calls as the compartment door slammed. This is important because this is the start of the whole mess that is the Marauders versus Snape. The entire mess. And this is where we get to go into their times at school, which is the hardest part for me to talk about. So from the Prince's Tale, we don't really get much because Harry didn't want to see it, because we see it in his other memory and Harry didn't want to relive that. And I don't want to talk too much about Snape. I mean, I know he's a huge part of Sirius's life, but there is some things in here that lead up to stuff that Sirius has done, so I'm going to kind of have to get into Snape. And no, for the record, putting this out there, I don't think Snape is all that grand of a character either. I'm not trying to be like, Sirius is horrible, Snape is great, because no, they're both bad. They both have their good and they both have their bad. Snape has more bad than Sirius does, but that doesn't mean that Sirius wasn't bad as well. So let me just put that out there. I'm not trying to say any of that. I could go into another video about Snape if you guys like, but right now this is strictly Sirius. Sorry, I'm laughing at my own terrible puns. Those puns have been made since the books came out, and now I'm joining them laughing at it. Sirius isn't in this, but it's a very important part for something that Sirius does. So this is after Lily is talking to Snape about his friends and how they're interested in the dark arts and all that stuff, and he's like, what about the stuff Potter and his mates get up to? Demanded Snape. What's Potter got to do with anything? Said Lily. They sneak out at night. There's something weird about that Lupin. Where does he keep going? He's ill, said Lily. They say he's ill. Every month at the full moon, said Snape. I know your theory. Why are you so obsessed with them anyway? Why do you care what they're doing at night? I'm just trying to show you they're not as wonderful as everyone seems to think they are. That leads up to one of the worst things that I think Sirius has ever done in his life. They're talking about the moment that I just read, well, not the moment I just read to you, it's not in there. Why I read that part to you, this is why I did. So Lupin's talking. Professor Snape is at school with us. He fought very hard against my appointment to Defense Against the Dark Arts job. And then he says, you see, Sirius here played a trick on him which nearly killed him, a trick which involved me. Then Black says, it says Black, it doesn't go by his first name. Then Sirius replies, it serves him right, sneaking around trying to find out what we were up to, hoping he could get us expelled. And then Lupin comes in and he said, Severus was very interested where I went every month. We were in the same year, you know, and we didn't like each other very much. And then he goes on talking about James, and then it says, Sirius thought it would be amusing to tell Snape all he had to do was prod the knot on the tree trunk with a long stick, and he'd be able to get in after me. Well, of course, Snape tried it. If he'd gotten as far as this house, he would have met a fully grown werewolf. But your father, who heard what Sirius had done, went after Snape and pulled him back, a great risk to his life. How freaking messed up is that? Like, that is so dark. Sirius, as a teenager, in school, deliberately tried to kill another student using his best friend. However, he did do some amazing things for Lupin as well. I'm honestly not quite sure when the whole Severus thing happened, so I wasn't sure if I should put this before or after that. But he did become an animagus. I mean, first of all, he stayed friends with Lupin when he found out in his second year what Lupin was, and they stayed friends, and they all came up with an idea to become animagus, and which is absolutely spectacular friendship. It's one of the greatest things Sirius has done, I think. Then we move on to when Sirius was 16 years old. He ran away from his home and went to go live with James for a little while. Sirius is talking to him about it and talking about how his sweet old mother blasted him off and he ran away from home. And Harry was like, you ran away? And Sirius was like, when I was 16, I had had enough. And Harry's like, where did you go? Your dad's place, said Sirius. Your grandparents were really good about it. They sort of adopted me as a second son. Yeah, I camped out at your dad's during the school holidays, and when I was 17, I got a place of my own. My Uncle Alfard had left me a decent bit of gold. He's been wiped off here too, that's probably why. Anyway, after I looked after myself, I was always welcome at Mr. and Mrs. Potter's for Sunday lunch, though. So they're out of school now. And moving on to the Secret Keeper, which I have a lot of issues with the Secret Keeper. He says, Harry, I as good as killed them. I persuaded Lily and James to change to Peter at the last moment. Persuaded them to use him as Secret Keeper instead of me. I'm to blame, I know it. The night they died, I arranged to check on Peter to make sure he was still safe, but when I arrived at his hiding place, he'd gone. Yet there was no sign of a struggle. It didn't feel right. I was scared. I set out for your parents' house straight away, and when I saw their house destroyed and their bodies, I realized what Peter must have done, what I'd done. So my issue here, I'll get to his depressed state in a moment. I first want to talk about the changing of the secret keepers. Like, okay, so I have so many issues when it comes to secret keeping, because first of all, why couldn't James or Lily be their own secret keeper? I mean, and if that wasn't possible, why wouldn't Black do it? If he goes on to say, I would never betray them. You have to believe me, Harry. I won't betray them. I never would have. Yet, even if they crucioed him, threatened to kill him, if he actually would never betray them, they would never get the information they needed about the Potters, because for being a secret keeper, you have to give the address, the place where the people are hiding, willingly. Did Sirius think that he would do that? Like, what? Oh, I have so many issues with this. So the only thing I can take away from this is they either clearly didn't think it through because it was a hard time, so they just didn't, or James was just like, he's my best friend, he won't betray us, he should do it. Did Sirius not have did Sirius not have enough confidence in himself to keep that secret? Because he thought he would willingly give it up? Like, I have so many issues with the secret keeper, and I don't think it's a whole Sirius issue. Like, I don't think it's all Sirius's fault, but at the same time, it's like, if you have to give it up willingly, part of me has to think, did Sirius think he would? And I know where he's coming from when he switched to Peter, because who would suspect Peter? I mean, obviously. No one would. Poor Peter. No one would. So I can see where he was coming through from on that, and it was very clever of him. It really was. He did give his bike away so that Hagrid could take Harry to where Dumbledore wanted him to be taken. So moving on to when he goes after Peter, fully intend on killing him too. Like, can he just not stop trying to murder people? First Severus, and now Peter, and like, kid, calm down. Sirius goes on saying that he went after Peter, and Peter blasted 13 people and like bit his finger off, like cut his finger off and stuff. And then he just starts laughing a humorous laugh because he's just like gone insane at this point. He's just completely just like gone into a mental breakdown, I would say. He's just felt like he's lost everything and just starts laughing because it's done. Then of course he gets thrown into Azkaban, which does something to you. He's in there and he's trying to keep what sanity he has, and it's miserable, and he's barely eating and struggling with losing his friends and having these Dementors around, which are just bring out the worst in everybody. He's in there for 12 years. He breaks out and he goes to find Harry. He wants to see Harry before school starts. So he does that. He checks up on Harry. Then he's on his way to Hogwarts so he can kill the rat. He, first of all, just is completely mad at this point. And I'm not talking about like anger, which I'm sure he is. I'm talking about like insanity. He's just full-blown bloodlust at this point, and he's wanting this rat dead. So he tries to break in, he slashes up the fat lady's portrait, and he comes in with a knife at Ron's bed, and it's just like, Sirius, you're not doing yourself any favors here. But again, he's just so angry, and he just broke out of like the worst place in the world, so you can't really blame him too much for not having his mind completely put together. This is going to be when they first truly have moments with him. So he comes running up and he just, first of all, knocks Harry down. But mind you, Harry's gonna cast a spell to defend himself, so he has to knock the wand out of the way and everything. But did he really have to hit him that hard? But beside the point, he knocks him down and like practically cracks a few of Harry's ribs, and is just so driven to get this rat, and ends up grabbing Ron's arm and dragging him down to the Shrieking Shack. Harry tackles him because he's like, he killed my mom and dad, and he lunges forward and tackles Sirius, tackles Sirius to the ground and punching Sirius. It says, Hermione was screaming, Ron was yelling. There was a blinding flash of wands, and Black's hand sent a jet of sparks into the air that missed Harry's face by inches. Harry felt the shrunken arm under his fingers twisting madly, but he clung on, his other hand punching every part of Black he could find. Which, mind you, in Harry's defense in this, he thought Black killed them, so he's just like, how dare you, and he's driven by how dare you and everything, so he's attacking now. And, Black's free hand found Harry's throat. No, he hissed, I've waited too long. Fingers tightened, Harry choked, his glasses askew. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I get you have to defend yourself, but you're literally choking your godson. Like, calm the frick down. And then he saw Hermione's foot swing out of nowhere. Black let go of Harry with a grunt of pain. How long was he gonna choke Harry? He didn't let go till Hermione kicked him. And I know you have to get the person off you because they're literally beating the crap out of you, and you need to get them off. But he could have just like thrown Harry off somehow. He is bigger than him. It took Hermione kicking him in the shins to get Harry off. And not only does he choke him, but it says his fingers tightened. Serious. Like, I can understand both sides of this. I can understand defending yourself, but also, like, you are choking your godson. And then Snape comes in. So he says, the joke's on you again, Severus, Black snarled. As long as the boy brings his rat up to the castle, I'll come quietly. And then he goes on, you've got to hear me out. The rat, look at the rat. So I do absolutely love that he's like, okay, I'll come with you, just hear me out, bring the rat, just please hear me out, and literally pleading for his life, as he should. The fact that Sirius, for once in his life, actually steps back. He doesn't let his anger and all that step in the way. So Harry steps in, he's like, I don't reckon my dad would have wanted them to become killers just for you. And Sirius says, you're the only person who has the right to decide, Harry. But think what he did. So he really wants to kill him, but because Harry's like, don't. I don't think my dad would have wanted this. Sirius steps back and he's like, okay, you're the only person that has the right to decide this. He didn't just go with what he really, really wanted. He was like, okay, Harry has the right, this is his choice, I will respect that. They rescue Sirius, and he gives him the best compliment that he can. When we know as much as we know about James, I don't think it's much of a compliment, but for Black being who he is and Harry not knowing who his dad was, he gives him like one of the greatest compliments. He goes on, he's like, how can I ever thank? Go! Harry and Hermione shouted together. And then Black turns around and he goes, we'll see each other again. You are truly your father's son, Harry. Did I mention he bought the firebolt for Harry because he lost his broom? I don't think I did. He goes off, and because Harry fell off his broom and everything, because the Dementors got smashed up, he bought him his firebolt and he sent it out and was like, it was like his first gift to Harry, and I just thought it was amazing that he went out and bought like the most expensive broom ever. Like, he could have just bought any other broom, but he was like, no, I'm gonna get him the biggest broom possible. And that's just, it's so serious. Just go all the way. At the end of the book, he writes Harry a letter and sends it with Pigwidgeon. Tells him we're in hiding, I won't tell you where. I was the one who sent you the firebolt. Crookshanks took the order to the Owl office for me, used your name, but told them to take the gold from my own Gringotts vault. Please consider it as 13 birthdays worth of presents from your godfather. And then he goes on to apologize for He's like, for the fright I think I gave you the night. Let me try reading this, maybe that'll help. I would also like to apologize for the fright I think I gave you that night last year when you left your uncle's house. I had only hoped to get a glimpse of you before starting my journey north, but I think the sight of me alarmed you. He goes on to write him a Hogsmeade note being like, I, Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, give him permission. And then I think another amazing thing that he does is he goes on and he's like, Ron doesn't have a pet because of me. And so here's this owl you can have, and I love Penguin so much. Oh my gosh, I love Penguin. And so not only does he get Harry a firebolt, but also he's like Ron's pet list, so here's an owl. And so yeah, I think it's really great. But that's all I have for Prisoner. Now we're moving on to Goblet. I will admit, I'm not his biggest fan, but I actually do like him in Goblet of Fire. I think that's his best book. I think Sirius is at his best in this book. So I think this book really does him justice as being the godfather and not seeing Harry as James, actually seeing Harry as Harry. And if you're still here, congratulations. You don't get too much of Sirius in Goblet. You really don't. For some reason I thought there would be more of him, but there wasn't. And he writes Harry a few letters. He writes Harry 2 letters over the summer with tropical birds, just talking about how he's doing and everything. He writes Harry another letter. So basically, he doesn't come in till this moment, pretty much, because it mentions in like, I don't know, the first chapter, I think? The 3rd chapter. Chapter 3, yeah. So that chapter, it mentions that he wrote Harry twice. This is his first like real like when you actually see what he's saying. And he's talking about Harry and his scar, and he's like, the news about your scar is the latest in a series of strange rumors that have reached me here. If it hurts again, go straight to Dumbledore. They're saying he's got Mad-Eye out of retirement, which means he's reading the signs even if no one else is. Harry writes him and he's like, I was just kidding about my scar. It's actually, I think I imagined it and everything. So Sirius writes back, nice try, Harry. I'm back in the country well hidden. I want you to keep me posted on everything that's going on at Hogwarts. Don't use Hedwig, keep changing owls. Don't worry about me, watch out for yourself. And don't forget what I said about your scar. I think he really, really comes through in this book about being the godfather and being really responsible. Like I feel like this is his most responsible book. He's really stepping up to his role with Harry. And he's saying, I can't say everything I would like in a letter. We need to talk face to face. The fire in Gryffindor Tower at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 22nd of November. I know better than anyone you can look after yourself, and while you're around Dumbledore and Moody, I don't think anyone will be able to hurt you. However, someone seems to be having a good try. Be on the watch, Harry. I still want to hear about anything unusual. So this is when he's talking into the fire, talking to Sirius in the fire. Harry's just like, how are you? And he's like, never mind me, how are you? And Harry just is going on about what's going on and how the first task is dragons. And Sirius is like, he looks at him full of concern. And it says that his eyes had not yet lost the look that Azkaban had given him, that deadened, haunted look. So he goes on and he warns Harry. He's like, Karkaroff, Harry, he was a Death Eater. You know what Death Eaters are, don't you? And he was in Azkaban with me, but he got released. I bet that's why Dumbledore wanted an Auror at Hogwarts, to keep an eye on him. Moody is the one that caught him, put him in Azkaban in the first place. And so he just goes on to warn Harry, be careful and just look out for these people. And then he goes on to, Voldemort could have found out about the tournament, and they're like, I don't know. Karkaroff doesn't strike me as the type who would go back to Voldemort unless he knew Voldemort was power enough to protect him, is what Sirius says. Whoever put your name in the goblet did it for a reason. Can't help thinking the tournament would have been a very good way to attack you. And Harry's like, really good plan from where I'm standing. They just have to stand back and let the dragons do their stuff. And Sirius is like, right, these dragons, there's a way, Harry. Don't be tempted by a stunning spell. Dragons are strong and too powerful powerfully magical to be knocked out by a single stutter. You need about half a dozen wizards at a time to overcome a dragon. But you can do it alone. There is a way. A simple spell is all you need. And then, of course, someone comes down, so he can't exactly help him, but he does try, and he does give the idea a simple spell. He does try and help him, and he's like, be careful, you can do this, you just need a simple spell, just watch out for things at Hogwarts, focus, and stuff like that, which is very good advice. And then you don't really hear from him again until, later in the book, and he sends another letter. Congratulations getting past the Horntail. Whoever put your name in the goblet shouldn't be feeling too happy right now. He was going to suggest a curse to the dragon's eye because it's the weakest point, but yours was way better. I'm impressed. Don't get too complacent though, Harry. You've only done one task. Whoever put you in the tournament's got plenty more opportunity if they're trying to hurt you. Keep your eyes open, particularly when the person we discussed is around, and concentrate on keeping yourself out of trouble. Keep in touch. I still want to hear about anything unusual. So again, he's really matured, and he's really taking on the role of being a responsible adult to Harry. And then we get to visit Sirius and Hogsmeade, and this is one of my favorite lines, but also kind of frustrates me because Sirius doesn't follow this line. So they're talking about everything that happened at the World Cup and just everything that's been going on, trying to figure out who took Harry's wand in the top box at the Quidditch World Cup. And this is probably one of my all-time favorite lines that Sirius has said, but like I said, it also frustrates me because he needs to take his own advice. He is like, okay, so they're talking about the house elf and Winky and Crouch, and of course Sirius muttered, of course he'd want to pin it down on anyone but his own elf, and then he sacked her. Yes, said Hermione in a heated voice, he sacked her just because she didn't stay in her tent and let herself get trampled. Hermione, will you give it a rest with the elf, said Ron. Sirius shook his head and said, she's got a measure of Crouch better than you have, Ron. If you want to know what a man is like, take a good look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. And everybody knows Sirius does not treat his inferiors well. So one of my favorite lines, but also frustrates me because it's just like, Sirius, this applies to you. Like, you don't treat your inferiors well. Like, you should be listening to words you're saying and taking yourself into account in this too. But people don't often do that. But then he goes on to, again, be responsible. Like, this completely contradicts what he says in Order of the Phoenix. So I'm going to reference Order of the Phoenix in this. They're talking about having to get back to school because it's getting late, and Sirius says, you better get back to school. Now listen, I don't want you lot sneaking out of school to see me, alright? Just send notes to me here. I still want to hear about anything odd, but you're not to go leaving Hogwarts without permission. It would be an ideal opportunity for someone to attack you. And yet, in Order of the Phoenix, he gets so angry at Harry because Harry's like, no, Sirius, don't leave the house. It's not safe. Lucius Malfoy already suspects it was you. And he shuns Harry. Like, he's, like, livid that Harry's wanting to keep him safe and he shuns him. And yet, a book before, he's like, don't come see me. But, gosh, I'm gonna go find it in Order of the Phoenix. And it says, when's your next Hogsmeade weekend anyway? I was thinking we got away with the dog disguise at the station, didn't we? I thought I could. No, said Harry and Hermione together. And then Harry goes on to say, something Malfoy said on the train made me think he knew it was you. His father was on the platform, Sirius, you know Lucius Malfoy, so don't come up here, whatever you do, if Malfoy recognizes you again. And Sirius just goes, all right, I've got the point, said Sirius. He looked most displeased. Just an idea. Thought you might like to get together. I would. I just don't want you to get chucked back in Azkaban, said Harry. There was a pause in which Sirius looked out of the fire at Harry, a crease between his sunken eyes. You're less like your father than I thought, he said, a definite coolness in his voice. The risk would have been what made it fun for James. Look, I better get going. I can hear Creature coming down the stairs, said Sirius, but Harry was sure he was lying. I'll write and tell you next time I can make it back to the fire, then, shall I? If you can stand risking it. Sirius! Like, the crap! Like, literally a book before he was like, don't come to see me, it's too risky. But when Harry's like, no, don't come to see me, it's too risky, he just loses it. And he's just like, maybe you're not like your father and this and this. And I'm just like, child, you don't need to go around throwing that in Harry's face. Like, that's one of the cruelest things you can say to Harry. Like, holy crap. Sirius has no self-preservation. Like, he just, gosh, it's just, oh, Sirius frustrates me. He just outright frustrates me. And then he just like shuns Harry for weeks. Anyway, back to the point of Goblet of Fire, not in Order of the Phoenix yet, but that just bothers me. Sirius writes his 5th letter. Like, Harry, what do you think you're playing at walking off into the forest with Victor Crumb? I want you to swear by Return Owl that you're not going to oh my gosh, that you are not going to go walking with anyone else at night. There is somebody highly dangerous at Hogwarts. You could have been killed. Your name didn't get into the Goblet of Fire by accident. If someone's trying to attack you, they're on their last chance. Stay close to Ron and Hermione. Do not leave Gryffindor Tower after hours, and arm yourself for the 3rd task. He is giving some amazing advice in this book, and he's being really, really responsible and being such a good parent to Harry, which Harry needs. Sirius was sending daily owls now. Like Hermione, seemed to want to concentrate on getting Harry through the last task before they concern themselves with anything else. So he doesn't really want to worry Harry about anything else or talk about it. He's just like, focus on the 3rd task. This is what should be concerning you now. Just get through the task and then we can talk about things later. After the 3rd task and the whole Harry goes to the graveyard thing, Dumbledore says, Severus, please fetch me the strongest truth potion you possess. Minerva, kindly go down to Hagrid's house where you will find a large black dog sitting in the pumpkin patch. Take the dog up to my office, tell him I'll be with him shortly, then come back here. So Sirius is worried. He's hiding out in Hagrid's pumpkin patch because he's like, holy crap, Harry, I need to go see Harry. Is Harry okay? So he's waiting for him in the pumpkin patch and he's really, really concerned about him. And so Dumbledore's like, take him up to my office, tell him I'll be with him shortly. And I really love this book for Sirius. Like, I have to admit, he may not be my favorite person, but I think Goblet of Fire really, really does him justice. He's so amazing in this book, and he's so mature and so responsible, and I actually thought he was changing, and I was like, this is good. This is what I wanted to see, a mature, responsible, good person in Harry's life that can be a parent to him, and I thought this was going perfect. But anyway, so he gets to Dumbledore's office. Harry and Dumbledore get there. And then Sirius and they walk in, they're like, Sirius is standing there. His face was white and gaunt as it had been when he had escaped Azkaban. In one swift moment, he had crossed the room. Harry, are you all right? I knew it. I knew something like this would happen. His hand shook as he helped Harry into a chair in front of the desk. What happened? He asked more urgently. And then they go into telling him everything, and he's just, you know, he's so worried about Harry, and he's just like, I can't even think. Are you okay? What happens? How can I help? And he's being such a good parental figure in this book, and I love that. And honestly, I had no issues with Sirius in this book. Like, my issues for Sirius didn't come till I read Order of the Phoenix. I actually liked Sirius. I think this was his best book by far. I think he really showed growth and maturity in it and really did what Harry needed him to do. So I think this was a really good book for him. Now on to the hardest book for me to talk about when it comes to Sirius Black, Order of the Phoenix, because I have so many issues in this book with Sirius, and for all you absolute Sirius lovers who thinks he's perfect and don't want to hear any of the bad stuff, you are not going to like this part. But it needs to be said because it did happen. Sirius did these things and said these things, and they need to be acknowledged. My jaw hurts from talking. I think I'm at like over 2 hours of filming right now. I don't know what the final thing's gonna be. You guys are seeing that, but I've been talking about Sirius for 2 hours and I'm tired and I'm not even done yet. Starting off, when Harry first gets there, and I already talked about this, he's like, you met my mother and all this, so that happened. Harry's like, at least you know what's been going on. Oh yeah, said Sirius sarcastically. Listening to Snape's reports, having to take all his snide hints that he's out there risking his life while I'm sat on my backside here having a nice comfortable time, asking me how the cleaning's going. What cleaning? Asked Harry. Trying to make this place fit for human habitation. No one's lived here in 10 years, not since my mother died. Unless you count her old house elf, he's gone around the twist, hasn't cleaned anything in ages. So yeah, he's bitter being in his old house, his old family home, which I can't blame him for. I wouldn't want to go back either, especially with all the crap he's been through. And it's just like this, you can tell he's declining from last book. Like, he was so much happier being on the run. Even though he wasn't entirely happy being on the run, there's already a huge character change. At this point, I wasn't too upset with him. I was like, okay, I can kind of understand this. You're back in your old house. You don't want to be there. You're upset. I have to sneeze. Didn't come. I can understand you would be bitter about that. I would be bitter about that. Then he wants to start explaining things to Harry, which I think is a good thing. I mean, it's Harry's life. He should know this stuff. I think that's a big thing with Dumbledore in this as well, is that, I mean, I can also not wanting Harry to know things because Voldemort can get into his head, but at the same time, it's just like he deserves to know. It's his life. He's the one that's ultimately gonna have to do it. So I think that's a huge Dumbledore problem. And so Sirius being like, we should tell him things, it's like, okay, yeah, you should. It is his life, but at the same time, Molly's like, he's just a kid. It's like, yes, he's a kid. You can't really deny that either, but at the same time, it's either him or Voldemort in the end. So it's like, he needs to know this stuff. So that's basically what he's saying here. Now time for bed, I think, said Mrs. Weasley. Not just yet, Molly, said Sirius. You know, I'm surprised at you. I thought the first thing you'd do when you got here would be start asking questions about Voldemort. Yeah, that's when the whole thing with Molly goes down. And she's like, he's just a kid, he's too young, he doesn't need to know these things. Dumbledore would have told him, and I don't think he should, and all that. She's like, he's not James, Sirius. I'm perfectly clear who he is, thanks, Molly, said Sirius coldly. I'm not sure you are. Sometimes the way you talk about him, it's as though you think you've got your best friend back. Harry's like, what's wrong with that? And then Molly's like, what's wrong, Harry, is that you are not your father. However much you might look like him, you still are at school, and adults responsible for you should not forget it. Yeah, they should not forget it. And I do think, Sirius, because Mrs. Weasley isn't the only one to notice. Hermione notices as well, and I'll bring that up again later. Sirius is seeing Harry as James, or wants him to be James, and so that's what really makes him so mad at Harry sometimes, is that he's not James, and he's just like throwing James in his face. He's like, well, James would have done this, well, James would have thought this, and it's just like he's trying to make Harry James. He's seeing Harry as James, and when Harry doesn't act like James, he gets really angry about it. Meaning I'm an irresponsible godfather, demanded Sirius. Meaning you've known to act rashly, Sirius, which is why Dumbledore keeps reminding you to stay at home. Yes, she's right. He acts rashly. He does. He's very reckless. He doesn't care about putting himself in danger. He doesn't think things through. He just goes out and does it, and so she's not wrong there. And so Sirius is like, well, leave my instructions from Dumbledore out of this, if you please. Arthur, back me up. So then Arthur comes in and he's like, Dumbledore knows the position has changed, Molly. He accepts that Harry will have to be filled in. And she's like, yes, but there's a difference between that and inviting him to ask whatever he likes. And then Lupin butts in and he's like, personally, I think better that Harry gets the facts, not all the facts, Molly, but a general picture from us rather than a garbled version from others. Nothing too bad going on here. Molly just being like, he's just a boy, he's a kid, and she sees him as a son, so she's like wanting to protect her kid. And so again, nothing wrong here. I'll get to the point where Molly really stepped over the line, because I think she did. She did not need to say that. But again, I think Sirius needs to hear this because he does see him as James. Whether you guys deny him or not, and you're like, he sees him as an equal, it's like he sees him as, he wants James back, of course. Of course he wants James back. You're gonna want your best friend back. There's nothing wrong with that. But trying to make someone else who they're not, just so you can relive the old days and have your friend back is not okay. Molly's given in. She's like, I can see I'm going to be overruled. I'll just say this, Dumbledore must have had his reasons for not wanting Harry to know too much. Speaking as someone who's got Harry's best interests at heart, and Sirius, he's not your son. And then Molly just come back, he's as good as, who else has he got? And then Sirius comes in, he's got me. And this is where I think Molly kind of stepped over the line a bit, and it's like, you didn't have to go that far. She goes, yes, the thing is, it's been rather difficult for you to look after him while you've been locked up in Azkaban, hasn't it? Like, okay, I know you're upset and you don't like Sirius, Molly, but that was really stepping over the line. In a way, she is right. It is his fault. He didn't have to go to Azkaban. I mean, I guess if they thought he was the secret keeper, then they would have gone after him anyway, and he probably would have wound up there unless Dumbledore found him first, or unless he went to Dumbledore and was like, hear me out, listen, because Dumbledore probably would have listened. He's listened to a lot of people. Again, Sirius is a little at fault for getting himself in Azkaban, but at the same time, she didn't need to shove that in his face. But also, she does make some really good points in her argument. He is still a kid. Dumbledore did have his reasons. He's not James, and she's like, he's basically my kid, and she's not wrong on those points. I just think she did take it too far. So this is when they're looking at the tapestry, and I already read part of this to you earlier. But to finish it, Sirius is like, do you think I'm proud of having relatives like her? 'Cause they're talking about Bellatrix, and Harry's like, sorry, I didn't mean it, I was just surprised. And he's like, doesn't matter, don't apologize. And he's like, I don't like being back here. I never thought I'd be stuck in this house again, which sucks. I will admit, I feel really bad for him. I wouldn't mind if I could just get out occasionally. I do, and do some useful things. I've asked Dumbledore whether I can escort you to your hearing, as Snuffles obviously, so I can give you a bit of moral support. So I can't blame him too much right here. Again, I don't have that big of an issue. My issues start later in the book. Then we move on. So then Harry's talking about living with him if he gets expelled. And he's like, we'll see. And then he's like, I'd feel a lot better about the hearing if I knew I didn't have to go back to the Dursleys. Sirius is like, they must be bad if you prefer this place. So Creature... several times Creature slid into the room and attempted to smuggle things away under his loincloth, muttering horrible curses every time they caught him at it. When Sirius wrestled a large golden ring bearing the Black's crest from his grip, Creature actually burst into furious tears and left the room sobbing under his breath and calling Sirius names that Harry had never heard before. It was my father's, said Sirius, throwing it onto the sack. That's just, why don't you just let him keep it? I mean, I get it, you're mad at your family, but like, that's just cruel. He bursts into tears, and it's just like he wants all this stuff to like save his family, and it's just like he took it from him. And this is where I think Harry is good about this. So I'm gonna go to the Deathly Hallows, and I'm actually gonna refer to the Deathly Hallows later as well, but I'm just gonna read this one part first. So Creature's talking about Regulus and everything, what Regulus has done, and about the locket, and Harry just goes, Creature, I'd like you to have this, he said, pressing the locket into the elf's hand. This belonged to Regulus, and I'm sure he'd want you to have it as a token of gratitude. Creature let out a howl of shock and misery and threw himself onto the ground. Took him nearly half an hour to calm down Creature, who was so overcome to be presented with a Black family heirloom for his very own that he was too weak at the knees to stand properly. When he was finally able to totter a few steps, they all accompanied him to his cupboard, watched him tuck up the locket safely in his dirty blankets, and assured him that they would make its protection their first priority while he was away. Oh my gosh! Can I just stop here for a second and just appreciate Creature? I love Creature. He's my favorite house elf. This is the difference between Sirius and Harry. Sirius just rips it away because he doesn't want anything to do with the Black family, and he's like, I don't want you to have this because I don't like you, and we don't need to keep these memories. So he rips it away, and Harry is just like, here's something that belonged to the Blacks and Regulus, and you can have it. And he just bursts into tears of joy because he has something from his families, especially his favorite person in the family, and I'm just like... So I just think that was really just cruel of Sirius to do. I mean, I can understand not wanting to see any of your family stuff, especially if you grew up like he did, but it's just like, what? Sirius, like, come on. He just got back and they're all shouting, he got off, which I have to say is probably one of my favorite parts of this book. Harry could not help but noticing there was one person within number 12 Grimmauld Place who did not seem wholly overjoyed that he'd be returning to Hogwarts. Sirius had put on a very good show of happiness on first hearing the news, wringing Harry's hand and beaming just like the rest of them. Soon he was moodier and surlier than before, talking less to everybody, even Harry, spending increasing amounts of time shut up in his mother's room with Buckbeak. And then Hermione goes on to be like, don't feel guilty, you belong at Hogwarts, and Sirius knows it. Sirius knows it, and she's like, personally, I think he's being selfish. And again, he is being selfish, but he's lonely and everything, so I can understand that, but it is a little selfish of him. Ron, like, that's a bit harsh, Hermione. You wouldn't want to be stuck inside this house without company. And it's just kind of like, yes, I can see both their points. It is selfish, but at the same time, he doesn't want to be stuck in that house alone. So she's like, he'll have company. He just got his hopes up that Harry would be coming to live here with him. He just didn't want to get his hopes up even more. And he probably felt a bit guilty himself, because I think part of him was really hoping you'd be expelled, then you'd be outcast together. I sometimes think Ron's mum is right, and Sirius gets confused about whether you're you or your father, Harry. So he's like, so you think he's touched in the head? And she's like, no, I just think he's been very lonely for a long time. And I think both Molly and Hermione are right, that Sirius really does want James in Harry. And so that's what he sees, that's what he wants to see, because what I realized while researching this is every time Harry acts like Harry and doesn't do what Sirius would know James would do, he gets so mad at Harry about it. And it's just like, it really just proves their point that that's how he sees him. Sirius is allowed, of sense, to go out to the train station to see Harry off, and I love this scene because he's just so happy to be out and everything and to be free, but also it's very risky and he just doesn't care. So it's just like, come on, Sirius. He finally gets let out and he's so happy and he's running around and he's chasing birds. And my favorite is right here. The great black dog reared onto his hind legs and placed his front paws on Harry's shoulders, but Mrs. Weasley shoved Harry away toward the train door, hissing, "For heaven's sake, act more like a dog, Sirius." "See you," Harry called out the open window. The figures of Tonks, Lupin, Moody, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley shrank rapidly, but the black dog was bounding alongside the window, wagging his tail. Blurred people on the platform were laughing to see it chasing the train, but then they turned the corner and Sirius was gone. I love this little Padfoot moment where he gets to go out and just run freely, and he's just having a grand old time, and it's just like, he needed this. This is when they're talking to him when he's in the fire in the Gryffindor common room, and Hermione's like, this is a risk and everything, and he just doesn't care. So Sirius is talking about werewolves and everything, and he's like, scared of them, I expect. And then he's like, apparently Shiloh's part humans. She campaigned to have mer people rounded up and tagged last year too. Imagine wasting your time and energy persecuting mer people when there are little toe rags like creature on the loose. Ron laughed, but Hermione looked upset. Sirius, she said reproachfully. Honestly, if you made a bit of an effort with Creature, I'm sure he'd respond after all. You are the only member of his family he's got left. And Dumbledore said... And then Sirius just interrupts her, and she's got a point. And Dumbledore keeps saying it, but he's just so against everything that he's not even willing to try. And it's just like... Why are you so cruel? And this goes back to his thing in fourth year that I was talking about, where he's like, look at the way he treats his inferiors, not his equals. And it's just like, this is right here. I'm looking at what you're doing. This is exactly what you were talking about last book. This is going into Hogsmeade. So he's worried about Sirius showing up in Hogsmeade, and he's worrying about it. Hermione's like, you've got enough on your plate without worrying about, like, serious recklessness too. He's just worried about how reckless he's going to be and doesn't want him to show up, and it goes back to the fireplace where he's just like, don't come. He's letting too much get to him, and I mean, I know it's hard and he has to be going through a hard time. So Fred did overstep here, but his father just got attacked by a snake. So, I mean, Sirius is like, listen, your dad's been hurt while on duty for the order. It's fishy enough without his children knowing that it's seconds after it happened. You could seriously damage the order. And they're like, Fred and George are like, we don't care about the dumb order. Our dad's dying. It's our dad dying we're talking about. And so Sirius is trying to be a responsible adult here, which is good. Sirius is like, your father knew what he was getting into, and he won't thank you for messing things up for the order. Sirius said angrily, this is how it is. This is why you're not in the order. You don't understand. There are things worth dying for. Like, first of all, don't say that to the kids. Like, don't be like, your father's life is not... He can die as long as it was... for this. Like, don't say that to them. What is wrong with you? Like, you can't just go saying that to them. But then Fred overstepped here, but I mean, Sirius just said that to them. So he was like, easy for you to say stuck here. I don't see you risking your neck. Well, that was a low blow, but also Sirius, you really shouldn't have said that to them. There are things worth dying for. Like, yes, there are things worth dying for, but that's not what you tell people when they're freaked out that their dad is dying. Like, you could have worded that better. Molly Weasley's talking. She turned to Sirius to thank him for looking after her children throughout the night. And Sirius said he was pleased to be able to help because, I mean, he's been dying to do something to help. So I'm pretty sure he was very pleased to be able to do something and hope they would all stay with him as long as Mr. Weasley was in the hospital. And she says, Sirius, I'm so grateful. I think he'll be there a little while, and it would be wonderful to be nearer. Of course, that might mean we're here for Christmas. So Sirius is like, the more the merrier. And it's obvious, and it says, with such obvious sincerity that Mrs. Weasley beamed at him and helped out with breakfast. And then Harry's like, can I have a quick word with you? And he's like, urgently, he's like, now. He tells Sirius every detail of the vision he had, and Sirius is like, did you tell Dumbledore? And Harry's like, yes, but he didn't tell me what it meant. He doesn't tell me anything anymore. And so Sirius is like, I'm sure he would have told you if it was anything to worry about. And Harry's like, Sirius, I think I'm going mad back in Dumbledore's office. Just before we took the port key, a couple of seconds, I thought I was a snake. I felt like one. My scar hurt. Sirius, I wanted to attack him. And Sirius is just like, it must have been the aftermath of the vision. That's all. You were still thinking of the dream or whatever it was. And that wasn't it, said Harry, shaking his head. It was like something rose up inside me, like there was a snake inside me. You need sleep, said Sirius firmly. You're going to have breakfast, and then you're going to go upstairs to bed, and then you can go see Arthur after lunch with the others. You're in shock, Harry. You're blaming yourself for something you only witnessed, and it's lucky you did witness it, or Arthur might have died. Just stop worrying. He's like, don't blame yourself. You did a good thing. It's a good thing you saw it. You told Dumbledore, which is what you were supposed to do. It's what I've been telling you all last year to do. And then, of course, one of my favorite moments. It's Christmas, around Christmas time and everything, and he's in a really good mood, and he's just walking around, and he's marching up the stairs to go feed Buckbeak, singing God Rest Ye Merry Hippogriffs. And honestly, every time I hear God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, Hippogriffs pops into my head a lot because of him. So thank you, Sirius, for that song. And he's just so happy to have people there and everything. And then we move on to more Creature and Sirius trouble. So it's around the time when he's talking about, has anyone seen Creature lately? Haven't seen him since we've been back here. You were ordering him out of the kitchen. Yeah, Sirius said, frowning, you know, I think that's the last time I saw him too. He must be upstairs somewhere. Sirius is talking about how no, unless they're given clothes, they can't leave. And Harry's like, but Dobby did to warn me, and then he punished himself. And Sirius just kind of like blows that off, and he's like, I'll look for him later. I expect I'll find him upstairs crying his eyes out over my mother's old bloomers or something. Of course, he might have crawled into the airing cupboard and died, but I mustn't get my hopes up. Like, that's cruel. I hate the way he treats Creature. I hate it. I mean, I know it's his childhood home, and Creature loved the Black family. Regulus treated him wonderfully, so of course he's going to love them, especially Regulus, and Sirius is just so cruel to him, and it's just like, are you serious right now? Like, get a grip. So Hermione even says in Deathly Hallows, Harry Creature doesn't like that. He's a slave. House elves are used to bad, even brutal treatment. He's loyal to people who are kind to him, and Mrs. Black must have been, and Regulus certainly was, so he served them willingly. Sirius was horrible to Creature, Harry, and it's no good looking like that. You know it's true. Creature had been alone for a long time when Sirius came to live here, and he was probably starving for a bit of affection. I'm sure Miss Sissy and Miss Bella were perfectly lovely to Creature when he turned up, so he did them a favor and told them everything they wanted to know. I've said all along, wizards would pay for how they treat house elves. Well, Voldemort did, and so did Sirius. And Harry had no retort as he watched Creature sobbing on the floor. He remembered what Dumbledore had said to him mere hours after Sirius's death. I do not think Sirius ever saw Creature as a being with feelings as acute as a human's. Look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals, right, Sirius? So Sirius is again really depressed because everybody's gone from the holidays. So Snape comes over. They're not back at Hogwarts. Did I say back at Hogwarts? I didn't mean that. They're still at Grimmauld Place, but Sirius knows they're going back to Hogwarts, so he's depressed and he's getting sad again because everybody's leaving. And then Snape comes in and he's like, I need to talk to you. And Sirius is like, you don't give orders here. This is my house. Snape's like, I'm supposed to see you alone. And Sirius is like, I'm his godfather. And so they're going after each other's throats as usual. And Snape's like, I'm here on Dumbledore's orders, but by all means stay because I know you like to feel involved. So of course he has to poke at him. They're just going back and forth about this. She's like, I want you to study protecting your mind and all that. Snape's telling him, I want you to learn this. And so Harry's like, okay, who's going to be teaching me? And Snape's like, I am. And so Sirius steps in. He's like, why can't Dumbledore teach Harry? Why you? I suppose it's a headmaster's privilege. I assure you I didn't beg for the job. And he's like, I expect you this time at my office and all that. And then as he turns to leave, he just can't let him go. He's like, wait a moment. And he's like, I'm in a hurry. I don't have time. And Sirius is like, I'll get to the point then. If I hear you using occlumency lessons to give Harry a hard time, you'll have me to answer to, which is like, okay, you could have just let him go, but fair enough. Don't abuse your power. Snape's like, how touching. I'm sure you've noticed that Harry is very like his father, or not Harry, that Potter is very like his father. So Sirius is like, yes, I am, he said proudly. And then Snape's like, well then, you know, he's so arrogant that criticism simply bounces off him. And it's like, this just kind of proves my point that Sirius is like, yes, he's like James, so when Harry doesn't act like James, that's why he gets mad. He's literally proud, and he's like, yes, I've noticed. And Snape means that cruelly, because it is cruel. James is awful to be like. Don't be like James. Frankly, don't be like Sirius either. But so he's like, he's very like his father. He's very arrogant and everything, which James was. And Sirius is like, yeah, he is. And he never saw Harry as Harry. He was like, yeah, he is like James. And he's like, he's arrogant. And then he gets mad because, of course, he insulted his friend. And so Sirius stands up to point a wand at him, and of course Snape pulls his wand out because Sirius pulled his wand out, and Harry stands up and he's like, Sirius. Sirius appeared to not hear him, and then Sirius is like, I warned you, Snivelus. His face barely a foot from Snape's. I don't care if Dumbledore thinks you've reformed. I know better. They keep going back and forth, and Snape is like, did you know that Lucius Malfoy recognized you last time you risked a little jaunt outside? Clever idea, Black. Getting yourself seen on a safe station platform. And then Sirius raises his wand because he's furious, and because he doesn't like to hear that he's in the wrong. And Harry's like, no, Sirius, don't, and he stands in the way. And Sirius is like, are you calling me a coward? And Snape's like, yes, I suppose I am. And so Snape's egging him on, which isn't helping anybody, but Sirius could just stop. Be a bigger man here and just stop. He couldn't have just said anything at all. He should have just let him go, honestly. And so Sirius is like, Harry, get out of it," snarled Sirius, pushing him out of the way with his free hand. And the kitchen door opens and everybody sees it and they're just like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And so they both lower the wands. They're like, "What's going on?" And Sirius is like, "Just a friendly little chat between two school friends." Going on to the next page, Harry said he had an unpleasant sensation in his chest. He didn't want to say goodbye to Sirius. He had a bad feeling about this parting, and he felt it was upon him to say something to Sirius to stop him doing anything stupid. Harry was worried that Snape's accusation of cowardice had stung Sirius so badly he might even now be planning for some foolhardy trip beyond Grimmauld Place. It's just like, Harry shouldn't be having to worry about this. He's the child here. Snape... Okay. Snape is egging him on. He is. But Sirius is an adult. Harry should not be having to tell him, "Don't be reckless, don't do this." He should not be having to worry about this. This is Sirius' job to worry about Harry doing stuff like this. And Sirius is egging him on because that's what James would do. And he's not worried about himself, so Harry's worried about him. And it's like, when did Harry become the adult to Sirius here? So Sirius gives him the package and he's like, "Take this, let me know if Snape's giving you a hard time. I want you to use it if you need me." So Harry's like, "Okay," and he shoves it inside the jacket. It would not be he, Harry, who lured Sirius from his place of safety, no matter how fully Snape treated him in their forthcoming occlumency classes. Harry's so worried about him that he's like, "I'm not even going to use this to tell you things that's going on because I know you'll do something stupid and reckless, and I don't want you to, so I'm trying to save your life here." And it's just like, Harry should be able to talk to him about everything without worrying about what Sirius is going to do. This is where I said should have been in the Hogwarts days that I said I'll just save till this book. Snape's worst memory, my least favorite chapter in this book. And they're outside and James is playing with the snitch and Wormtail's like, "Yay," and cheering him on, and James is like, "Yes." He loves the attention and the praise. And so Sirius is like, "Put that away, would you?" Before Wormtail wets himself from excitement. James is like, "If it bothers you," and he puts it back in his pocket. And then Sirius is like, "I'm bored. I wish it was a full moon." And then Lupin's like, "You might. We've still got Transfiguration. If you're bored, you could test me here." And Sirius snorts and he's like, "I don't need to look at that rubbish. I know it all." So James is like, "This'll liven you up. Look who it is." And Sirius's head turned and he'd become very still, like a dog that has scented a rabbit. And then he's like, "Excellent," he said softly, "Snivelous." And then of course, anybody who knows the books knows exactly what happens, and I'm not gonna read it. Such terrible teenagers. And don't pull that "boys will be boys." No, this is bullying. This is bullying, this is torturing people, and it's not just Snape they did this to. So then, one of my least favorite moments besides that memory is when Harry's talking to them about it. So he talks to them in the fire, and he's talking to Lupin and Sirius. Harry told them what happened, and when he didn't finish, neither Snape nor Lupin spoke for a moment. Then Lupin said quietly, "I wouldn't like you to judge your father on what you saw there, Harry. He was only 15. And then Harry's like, "I'm 15. And it's like, yeah, Harry's 15. Like, Lupin, you are not making... This is where Lupin really started to bother me too. I was like, you are not making a good argument here. This is not an excuse. Like, don't blame it on an age. Sirius is like, "Look, Harry, James and Snape hated each other from the moment they set eyes on each other. Just one of those things. You can understand that, can't you? James was everything Snape wanted to be. He was popular, good at Quidditch and all this. And Snape is just a little oddball who was up to his eyes in the dark arts. And James, whatever else he may have appeared to you, Harry, always hated the dark arts." And Harry's like, "Yeah, but he just attacked Snape for no good reason just because you said you were bored." Sirius is like, "I'm not proud of it." Like the freak you're not. Sorry, I don't believe it. And so Lupin looks sideways at Sirius, like he's judging him too. Lupin's like, "Look, Harry, what you've got to understand is that your father and Sirius were the best in the school at whatever they did. Everyone thought they were the height of cool. If they sometimes got a bit carried away." That is the worst defense ever, Lupin. Like, first you're like, "Don't judge your father too hard. He was only 15. Look, you got to understand, they thought they were the best in school at whatever they did. Everyone thought they were cool." That does not give you a reason to be a bully. Like, Oh my gosh. Harry is like, he messes up his hair, and Sirius and Lupin laughed, and they go talk about how they go on and they eagerly want to know what else happened. They're like, he was playing with the snitch, so Lupin eagerly, and I forgot he used to do that, so Sirius affectionately. Harry's like, yeah, well, I thought he was a bit of an idiot. And then Sirius is like, of course he was a bit of an idiot. We were all idiots, well, not Moony so much. And then Lupin's like, did I ever tell you to lay off Snape? Did I ever have the guts to tell you I thought you were out of order? And Sirius is like, well, you made us feel like we were ashamed of ourselves sometimes. So Sirius goes on, and he's like, look, your father was the best friend I ever had, and he was a good person. A lot of people are idiots at the age of 15. He grew out of it. Harry's like, yeah, okay. I just never thought I'd feel sorry for Snape. And then Harry has to leave quickly because footsteps are coming outside the door. But it's just like, Lupin gives the worst defense for them, and Sirius doesn't even apologize. When he's in the wrong, he doesn't want to hear it. And he gets so angry when Harry isn't acting like James would, and it's, I can't even with this character. I cannot even. This is all the way at the end of the book. All the order comes. Snape tells Sirius not to come. Snape tells Sirius, don't go, stay there, stay safe. And Sirius is just like, no. And so Sirius goes because he doesn't want to miss out on a fight, and he's like, Harry's there. Sirius is dueling Bellatrix, and Sirius is taunting her, and he's like, come on, you can do better than that. And he dies. We're back in Dumbledore's office after the whole fight goes down in the Ministry. Dumbledore goes on, Sirius cared about you a lot. So Dumbledore says, Sirius did not hate Kreacher. He regarded him as a servant unworthy of much interest or notice. Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike. Sirius was not a cruel man. He was kind to house elves in general, which is a good thing. He should be. He had no love for Kreacher because Kreacher was a living reminder of the home Sirius had hated. Harry's like, Snape goaded Sirius about staying in the house. He made out Sirius was a coward. And Dumbledore says, Sirius was much too old and clever to have allowed such feeble taunts to hurt him. Yeah, he should have been. Like, this is what I've been saying all along when I was reading their fight. Like, he should have just let him go. But of course, he's so quick to anger and just asking for some sort of fight. Just anything so he could just get an outlet of some sort. Just had to just egg him on, which is what Snape wanted. So Snape was starting to egg him on more, and it's just like, Dumbledore's right. He was too old and too clever and shouldn't have allowed the taunts to get to him like that. This is the moment where he says, I do not think Sirius ever saw Kreacher as a being with feelings as acute as humans. And it's just like, why? Gosh dang, I can't with this character. Like, I do feel so bad for him. I do, don't get me wrong. I cannot stand him. He's like everything I don't like in a person. I'm gonna talk a little bit more, but I do want to read one more last thing of Sirius. This is where Harry is about to die. Sirius was tall and handsome, and younger by far than Harry had ever seen him in life. He lopped with an easy grace, his hands in his pockets and a grin on his face. And Harry's like, does it hurt? And dying, not at all, said Sirius, quicker and easier than falling asleep. And this is where a lot of you are going to probably disagree with me, but honestly, with the life Sirius had and the way things were going, I think dying was the best thing to happen to him. He was miserable being alive, and he was locked up, and he was thrown in Azkaban, and he didn't really have a life. And so I just think he just got set free of everything when he died, and he got to be with his friends again, and he got James back instead of seeing him and Harry. And I think dying was honestly the best thing to happen to him, because I feel like if he lived, he probably still would have been miserable, and I think he's happier and better off now. As a few finishing thoughts, because I haven't talked enough, Sirius had a tendency to let his emotions get to him. This is not something he got from Azkaban. Because this happened way before that even happened. He did not handle his emotions well. He was never particularly calm about all things. Because he wasn't calm, these led to terrible decisions, and if he had more self-control and more control over his emotions, a lot of stuff could have been resolved. Obviously, he could be very cruel. He tried to kill Snape in school and then attempted to kill Peter Pettigrew twice outside of school and really wanted to, and he could be a very cruel person. Of course, we know he could be a hypocrite, seen as the way he treated Creature and how... Oh, it was a truck outside. I thought my dog was whining. Seeing how he treated Creature and what he says, that he's like, look at Crouch and if you want to see what a man's like, and it's just like, all right, hypocrite. So I found this thing, and I'm just going to read what they said about this because it's very good. They said, Sirius grew up seeing his mother being extremely cruel to creatures, and even though he surely thinks he bears no resemblance to his family, he picked up this habit. It's not always good to let your parents influence you. He tried so hard not to be like his family that he ended up being similar to how his family was, and it's just kind of like in the opposite direction, if that makes sense. Because he tried to do good, but then he was like trying too hard and he ended up being too cruel to people, and so he sort of kind of ended up a bit like his family anyway, especially when it comes to the Creature side of things and how he handled that. Sirius always had to prove a point. He was very touchy about his family and about so many certain things, and he always seemed to have to prove a point to people. Like, he couldn't just be. He lost his temper so many times, and he always took it out on other people, and he never apologizes to them for it. He loses his temper and he takes it out on people and he doesn't apologize to them, and it's just, he just needed to just breathe and relax and not let things get to him. Dumbledore was right about that. He needed to calm down and mature. He is constantly reckless, and therefore he didn't value his life or himself. And so he always did reckless things, not caring if he died, not caring who it would impact if he did die. And so he just did not care for himself or his safety at all, just wanted to go out to the world and prove a point. On that ranting, complaining note, I will say that for book 4 especially, I think he did give some very good advice to Harry, and he did give Harry an opportunity to have a father figure in his life and someone he could write to and talk to, and I think that was really, really good for Harry. I think in that aspect of things, that was very good for Harry to have. I'm glad Harry had Sirius. I'm not saying I wish Sirius wasn't in his life at all. I wish he was a better influence for Harry is what I'm saying. But I'm really glad he had Sirius, and I was so heartbroken for Harry when Sirius died because he lost that. But then again, Harry spent most of that year worrying about Sirius, and I feel like if Sirius lived, he would worry about him even more after that, and he probably would be so scared to tell him stuff because he knew how he'd react, and Sirius would be even more miserable. And honestly, I think it was good that he died. I think he was living too miserably that he needed to be set free. And I know that sounds harsh for Sirius lovers, being like, I think he should have died, but I think it's true. I think along with Snape, I think Snape dying was a good thing too, because I feel like if he lived throughout the Battle of Hogwarts, he would have been miserable as well. I think he was good for Harry to have that figure around to look up to have that father figure. I just think he wasn't the best person in the world. I don't think he's a bad person. I just think he makes a lot of bad choices. I think he's a good person and he tries to do good things. I mean, I know he tries to do good things. I just think he goes about it in the wrong way, and he needs to let things go more, and he does horrible things, especially at school, and I think he could be a really good person if he would just stop doing so many stupid, reckless, bad things. I had so much to say on Sirius because I have so many issues about this with people. They're always like, Sirius was amazing, he was so good, I love Sirius, I would love to hang out with the Marauders and be around Sirius, and I'm just like, do you just forget everything that he's done? Like, how they tortured him, like not just Snape, like everybody, and how they thought they were such hot shots, and how reckless he is, and how he just doesn't really care for other people's lives unless they're like really close friends to him. I would not want to hang around the Marauders. I would want to be as far away from them as humanly possible. They were so cruel, and I think Sirius is the worst Marauder. I really do. So that's like one of my biggest issues, so that's why I wanted to make this video. I know a lot of people are going to hate it. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate comments. You have your opinion. This is mine. I also took things from the book, so a lot of these are true, whether you wanted to hear them or not, or whether you wanted to be reminded that he did all these things or not. They're true. They're there. And also, my opinion. I don't like Sirius. I don't really like the Marauders. Honestly, Lupin's my favorite, and I even have issues with him sometimes, especially when he's trying to defend them by being like they're cool and stuff. But now I'm ranting. Okay. This has been a long enough video. My jaw hurts. I'm tired. I'm thirsty. It's hot in this room because I've turned my AC off to record this for 4 hours, like 4.5 hours, I think, actually. I think I've been recording this for about 4.5 to 5 hours, I think. Because I started this around like 1 o'clock and it's like 4:30. I don't think I started it at 1. That's why I'm saying a little over. But anyway. Oh gosh, my jaw hurts. Okay, so I'm just gonna end this video here because I could just probably go on and on about how much he bothers me, and I don't want to do that because I tried to keep this as unbiased as possible while letting my own opinions in as well on what I think. So yeah, I took it all from the book. I didn't get onto the Pottermore, the old Pottermore, the Wizarding World page to read about it. All of this was strictly from the book on how he is / was, and I put in some of my views about it too. I don't think he deserves all the hype that he gets. I think people need to realize he was a bully. He never grew out of being a bully, but also he should be pitied because he hasn't had an easy life. But you are responsible for your own actions, so I can't really defend him too much on that because yes, you had a horrible life. Harry had a horrible life, but that scared me. But you are responsible for your own actions and you need to take responsibility, and he doesn't. So I'm just gonna leave this video here. Anything you want to talk about, leave in the comments. If you want to say something about Sirius, say why you like him, say why maybe you agree with me and don't like him. Do you think he's a bad person, a good person? I think he's fighting for a good cause, and he is a good person. He just does bad things, and sometimes really, really cruel things. Therefore, I think, okay, I'm babbling now, but I'm just gonna say this one more thing. I see him as gray. I don't see him as bad. I don't see him as good. I think he's gray, but I think he's more on the darker gray side because I feel like he does more bad than he does good. So I'm not a big fan of Sirius. Let me know if you are, your thoughts on him. What was your favorite moment, your least favorite Sirius moment? Leave them down below, and I will see you guys next time if you still want to watch one of my other videos after this. But I will see you guys next time. Bye!